Welcome to the Augur 8 knot meeting for today, April 14th. Um, I dropped the link in the chat if you haven't seen it yet. Oh, got an AI note taker here. Let me get rid of that. I have a feeling this first agenda item is Kelly, unless somebody else knows who it's from. And I see Kelly just joining us, which is excellent timing because I was thinking the first agenda item was something that you likely pasted in.
Yes.
All right, maybe take us through it.
I mean, I don't know how much there is to take through. It's just looking at to see and I think this is honestly like example of a bigger not problem, but like a bigger thing of okay, there's things like CGit, people host on GitLab, but their own instances of GitLab. How do we collect on these sources that have uniform form, but they're like on a self-hosted platform? It's not like the general GitHub or the general GitLab. How I understand CGit is like it's a way to, and somebody can speak to more to it if they know more about this hosting, this way of hosting repositories. I'm looking to do analysis on this repository, and so see what happens. Try
So
to
for
see.
so there's I think there's two different questions. One is this specific repository looks like it is a standalone Git instance. It's not a self-hosted GitLab or a self-hosted GitHub. This just looks like a regular old Git repo. Is that right?
Yes, I would say that I was more bringing that up because that's what I've seen on example. Like I've been going through a lot of repositories in the last week for some analysis, and I've noticed this is just a single hosted GitHub or I mean Git-based repository, and I'm seeing it seems like in a similar style of what I'm seeing with people doing the self-hosted like GitLab instance.
So what would be, I guess what's critically different for this versus like a self-hosted GitLab instance is with a self-hosted GitLab instance, there's the possibility of leveraging the API that that self-hosted instance would provide to get data in addition to the commit log. So, and that's called multi-tenancy, which we've discussed before, but Augur has not implemented it. And effectively, what it would require is the storage of keys that are specific to these self-hosted instances as distinct from public keys for publicly common GitLab or GitHub hosted instances, and then the appropriate delegation of those keys to collect for the jobs that they actually are useful for. So that'd be the feature that would need to be added for that self-hosted GitLab GitHub component of what you're talking about.
Yeah,
And
and I
that
see
would
that being
yeah.
pretty likely for like something for like, that Adrian might work on once he gets in full time. Um, Surprise, Adrian. Um, I could definitely see that being something that he works on because I know that that's going to start being more and more of a thing. But to the topic on hand, um, trying to see, okay, how do we collect on this repository? What needs to, if there is anything that needs to be done that feature wise, or is it just adding it in and seeing what happens? I'm not really sure.
So, John, I don't know if you have any more up-to-date experience with this than I do. Certainly from the beginning, Augur was able to count commits on any repository. Now, any Git repository. So theoretically, that functionality does exist to go through the commit log just as we do for every other repository. The only caveat or the only hesitation I have is we haven't had that use case run across our desk in probably 3 years. So
Um,
I don't know if we've done anything that would be problematic at this point. And the one thing I can think of that we might have done is the contributor resolution work. but I don't know that that would prevent commit counting. It would just not be as thorough with the association of the commits with a corresponding platform username, which is probably okay since there is no corresponding giant platform of GitLab or GitHub.
Yeah, we're not looking for the platform username, but we would be wanting to get like the author. Like we'd be looking
Yeah,
at the author
yeah,
information.
yeah.
Just
The
like the
commit.
name, whatever name they have down, the email they use to do the commit, that type of information.
So I think Sean, you said John earlier. Did you mean me?
Oh, I meant you, John. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I forgot.
Sorry, there's multiple in here, so I just wanted to make sure. As
Yeah,
far
sorry.
as contributor resolution goes, I don't really touch that super frequently, but to my understanding, I believe everything that the contributor resolution relies on is done with Facade, and Facade deals with all of the git log stuff, which means that we should be able to get that kind of information from any Git repo, not necessarily one hosted on a Git forge like GitHub or GitLab, but any repo that we can pull the git log from, we should be able to get that information from. Um, but any other stuff like PRs and well, I mean, issues aren't really a thing in Git at all, but we don't support like the Git Forge um generic sort of merge request stuff that Git does. We only really support the platform specific stuff that like GitHub and GitLab do.
Yeah, for this use case, it would just be commit like would be purely for commit data and analysis.
Okay. Yeah, so that we could definitely get that. I think that uh it probably won't work to just add one of these attempt to add one of these repos as is. It would require a little bit of um, work on the scheduling side to get Facade to pick up non GitHub or GitLab repos, but it should definitely be
Would it?
possible to do that.
So it used to, I mean, this is where I kind of run out of not having tried this in like 3 years. It used to just pick up and do the commit counting, and it is that contributor resolution piece that's the only question mark I have. Um, so, I mean, I'm going to try to just drop this URL into an instance and see what happens myself. I'm just going to test it.
But yeah, if on the Augur maintainer side, like between John, Sean, y'all could at least like make if we figure out what we need to do to get here, I guess we're gonna try it out right now and see if it works. But I'm assuming I think we're under the assumption that it probably won't. Of figuring out, okay, what is the steps for us to get there? What of those I'd probably also try to see what of those that Kaio might be able to work on and trying to see the timeline of getting from point A to point B. I'm supposed to be doing the analysis on this is supposed to be for June, so it's not like something that needs to be done tomorrow. But I want to start kind of figuring out how we work towards this, and I think this kind of opens up a larger thing that I'm hoping to of like just like more platforms and stuff that I'm hoping to kind of put more force behind whenever Adrian gets in.
Okay, any more any more on that topic or
I'm not sure if it's necessarily on that topic, but I've just been dumping a list of I've seen all sorts of random other like forges and stuff just over the years, so I've just been putting lists of other stuff. I don't know how broadly the goal is to ever have Augur like pull stuff, but I know like going into like the stuff that GNU uses or like KDE and GNOME's separate Git labs and all that stuff. So I've just been dumping links in case any of that's interesting to
Mhm.
people. and or
Yeah.
myself in the future, I guess.
Yeah,
Is what
I
it
think that's
sounds
a
like.
great idea. Yeah. Future you will probably be very excited that you've done this. I'm doing some analysis right now. It's around like the CRA stuff that like I'm kind of getting a better idea of like, okay, what are these like other repositories that are becoming bigger to-dos? And actually I'll add on to this agenda or later of I opened some issues about GitLab. I think there's something breaking with GitLab with on the commit side. I have Kaio we're back into our on the like OSPO data team, we're back into our sprint structure that we had back in the James times, the 3 week sprint structure. And on his plate will be to do a more in-depth GitLab audit of okay, what is actually getting collected on and not whenever you generically put in a GitLab repository that is not self-hosted. But I just went on not exactly the exact topic on hand, but I'm just glad I remembered that I was looking at GitLab. Looks like I haven't been able to see any commits getting collected on, so I think there might be something a little off with commits. But yeah, good on you, Adrian, because I do think that this is something that I see for you in the like early days whenever you're coming in, because this is something that it's like if I get like data requests or things that come up, um, I want to start proactively looking at the more popular other Git besides GitHub and GitLab, like in their direct forms of okay, what are the more likely ones? What are the ones that, if we're being honest, impact the repositories like the upstreams of Red Hat and prioritize getting those features into Augur. So then whenever that analysis does come up, we're ready for it.
Okay. All right. So that's I mean, on some of these sources, I have seen them before. Um, I've talked about the GitLab, GitHub ones. Garrett, we actually started working on a collection worker for. The trick with Garrett is there are many different versions throughout the Linux Foundation. Automotive grade Linux uses one version, and then there are other projects that uses a different version. So Garrett doesn't have a consistent across versions API. So the trick with Garrett is just to sort of code around the specific version of the API, whatever the project that we're looking at is running. So that would be
Is that trying to pull like things in addition to just the commit history? Because I feel like all of them should just
yes,
expose the same git clone. Like you can just
yeah.
clone the repository and run metrics on that.
No, it would
At
be
least
it would be
okay.
for yeah, it would be for the comments
Okay.
other than the commit history. That's right.
Where is Augur at with like is it able to pull from a lot of these now if you're just looking at commit history, or is
That's
that
what
still
John and I have to go back and look at because
okay?
it's been like 3 years since anybody's asked to do that. Or as I said, originally, Augur's incorporation of Facade did this organically, but we've made a lot of changes focused on contributor resolution. And my concern is now that perhaps some of that will break, has broken the ability to get these other not Forge hosted repos. And so that's the thing we have to check.
So the main issue is that so Facade can work with any Git repo. That's not a problem. I'm fairly certain that if Facade got a URL for any of these, it should work exactly the same as it does for GitHub or GitLab. It's platform agnostic in that way. But the issue becomes actually scheduling Facade to do work on those repos because the way that we do scheduling has changed drastically, even over just the last 2 to 3 years, and actually even over the last year. I mean, we've adjusted scheduling many times. So the issue is just that I'm not certain, even if you did get a URL for one of these repos into the repo table somehow, if Facade would be able to pick it up with the current scheduling framework. So we'll need to double check that. And I think actually that at least on the front end, we expect only GitHub or GitLab URLs. So we might actually not even allow you to insert non-platform repos. So that will also be something that needs to be checked on.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. And that's kind of what I was expecting with all of this, that there might be a bit of a investigation rabbit hole of like, hey, what needs to be done. And so if there's anything specific that you just talked about, John, that'd be helpful for me to just open an issue so it's documented. Let me know. It seems like step one with this is just what has changed and what needs to be worked on to that the structure it's we can make this work. It just needs to get some steps to get there.
Yeah, basically, we know the logic exists in Augur to independently process the commit log. And I think it's, as John pointed out, and I mentioned, it's the things around that process that we need to ensure will still function
Mhm.
if passed a URL that is not a Git forge URL. All right, so Adrian, I don't know if you have an update on the fork family identification. I see it on the agenda.
I'm not sure. I don't think I was the one who put that there, or maybe I was trying to put it under data science or something. But yeah, I can
That's
kind of
cool.
demo what I demoed for data science last week if that helps.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious, just a little background for the group. Adrian, you're effectively trying to use the Git history to identify kind of a repository hash in order to evaluate similarity between forked repos and their original repo at a high level, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm gonna share my screen and take over.
Yeah, let me stop sharing my screen.
Let's see if my
Slack,
computer
there we
will
go.
behave today. You guys see the terminal window?
Not yet.
It doesn't look like you're currently sharing anything.
Did it just crash out? Okay, cool.
The best way.
I don't think it likes me in general.
Ah,
Yeah, can I do the whole screen? Is that gonna work?
Are you on Mac or Linux?
No, Linux.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
It might just be glitching out. My computer's a bit strange. Um, Actually, maybe I can find a good screenshot and put that in the doc as the
ah,
world's jankest screen share.
huh.
Okay, does that screenshot exist? There we
Yeah.
go. Yeah, so essentially, what I don't know where I last left off with updates on this, but essentially the sort of hash that I decided to calculate, I ended up going with something way deceptively simple and just grab basically the first character of each commit throughout the history of the project. Um, and that's kind of way too long. Like for repositories with like thousands or commits or whatever, like those kind of I'm calling it lineage ID. It's probably gonna get a new name later, but those are pretty long. Like it's kind of unreasonable to store that in a database. But I'm at least using those as like for comparison of like, okay, how much shared history is there between these two projects versus, hey, this project diverges more and this one doesn't, kind of like sort of just running analysis on that using kind of string prefix lengths and stuff. Um, and then that kind of got me thinking of like, okay, I can do this between two repositories, but like Augur, you're tracking hundreds of these things. So
Mhm.
I started kind of refactoring that comparison into more of a tree structure. So like you start off with obviously an empty tree, you add the first ID and it just adds one node. And then when you add the second ID, it basically kind of traverses the tree and compares it basically finds the point of where those two IDs kind of diverge, and it'll like split the existing nodes, and it basically forms a tree structure where all of the shared pieces between all the IDs are kind of represented by like one node that kind of splits into children. That I'm explaining this terribly, but you can
it's
almost
like
kind
a
of see it in
family
the
tree. It's a
yeah, pretty
family
much.
tree. Yeah.
Yeah, even though this is a small subset of the tree, because I've been trying to load in as many repositories as I can pull from the big instance API that have between like 500 and 10,000 commits, just to kind of stress test it, and it seems to be working well so far. But basically, you can kind of see like I think that child E in the screenshot, like you can kind of see like there's sort of groups of them. Like there's a couple of children underneath. And because I don't want to display like these huge long strings, I've kind of truncated them if they're a bit long and just put in parentheses the length of those strings. Yeah, so you can see those two children are like they have actually maybe not those two are probably a bad example because I was misreading it, but the one below it, um, you've got your two leaves, and then the parent of those has like was that 90? Um, there's like a shared bit of like 90 commits above them, a little bit higher.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, right there. Or
Okay.
just a little bit lower. Yeah. So that's you can
Oh,
even just see
98. Yeah.
from this tree printout, even though like this is not like this is kind of low level enough where I'm not printing out like here is the URL to the repository represented by this ID, but you can even in here still see sort of like family relationship. Like, hey, these two repositories like share at least 200 like commits worth of history, and then they diverge. Um, so you can kind of start seeing that.
So
And I think
does child D have like 5,630 shared commits with E? Is that
no,
what that
that's
means?
commits that are independent of. So that's actually at a different level of the tree.
Okay.
Um, so what I'm looking at under child 8, I think is that, I think
Okay.
it's an 8. That's a bit small on my screen.
It's
But
8, yeah.
yeah, so child eight's value is that 90 something characters, and then
98,
the
yeah.
children of child 8 hits like
Uh
400 and like 3 respectively. So that looks
yeah.
like it's probably a project where like it used to be maintained by someone and then they sold that. I bet you that's probably one of the simple mobile tools repositories where they had this like Android app for like I don't know contacts or whatever, and then they got sold off to I think it's like Zippo Apps, or someone who's known for putting ads in Android apps. And then the
Uh
community was like, we don't want to deal with that, and we're going to fork it. So I bet you that 400 commit chain is the community fork, and the 3 commits is probably the original repository under the new owners. Um, so you can kind of start seeing stuff like that. And then I've been playing around with trying to use sort of the traversal path to get to these things. So like obviously this whole screenshot's indented because it's a very sub small piece of the tree because this tree's got like hundreds of things in it now. But like I've been kind of using like child E, child F, child 1. Like I've been kind of using that like those sort of key points where they diverge as sort of a loose way to kind of identify repository families. That's not a great way to do it just because it those sort of points of where the nodes diverge and stuff will change based on what other repositories, like how many identifiers and how many repositories you're analyzing. Um, because like for some of the smaller test cases I've been doing, like the tree, after you get one or even one node deep, it's already starting to kind of show like the families and groups. But when you've got like
okay.
hundreds of these, you have to kind of go, there's like 2 or 3 levels of nodes that just have one character before it starts
So
to
is
really like show
so
you
is
some
this
stuff.
is this comparing like all the repos to all the other repos? Like how
Effectively, yeah, that's
okay.
the idea.
Wow.
Um,
That
I
seems
haven't
like
gotten like all of them in there yet. I think I was recently, I think this week or so, refactoring the cloning of repositories so that it can do it somewhat in parallel. Um,
yeah.
I think you probably saw me asking about that in
Hmm.
chat or something. But
Yeah, I did.
but yeah, so this is essentially just a way, yeah, like I've been just trying to pull in. I've got just a little local SQLite database that just tracks like here's the URL that we cloned and here's the ID that we got from that clone repository, just so I don't have to store all the cloned repositories on my system forever because I don't
Yeah,
have like 15 terabytes of space. Um,
right.
but So I've
Most
just been
people
kind of
don't.
clone the repository, calculate the ID, cache it, and then use that cache. I just pull everything out of the cache and throw it in the tree, and that's kind of how that screenshot gets generated.
All right, that's very cool. I mean,
Yeah,
that
so
that could go
I
a
think the
lot
idea
deeper
would be
than.
like, oh,
No, go ahead.
I was saying that I think I've sort of pivoted from like, yeah, instead of storing the IDs in like these lineage IDs in the database, because they're kind of living, like each new commit is going to change the ID like at the tail end. So I've sort of pivoted into thinking like this could be something that might run well, like in one of the like facade or in something that's kind of just run like it would run fresh each time, either
Yeah.
pointed at the whole folder of all of the clones, all the clone repositories or something, and have it
Hmm.
just pull the IDs and compare them all, and then you could kind of then at that point it's kind of up to presumably Augur team to like when you guys integrate this, deciding like how much shared history means it's like it's a fork or maybe finding a better way to like identify those families, and maybe that family identifier or something is kind of a smaller thing that can get stored in the database, or just
Yeah.
hey, these repositories are similar, um, something like that.
All right, thanks. I mean, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no problem. It sounds like it's really complementary to what the data science team's doing too. It seems like they're kind of deep diving on like Valkey and like so the three
Hmm.
big like relicense projects. They're like
Yeah.
really looking at the like how did the relicense and the community fork like impact the health. And then so like if I just bring them a whole pile of new new forks identified from this like to run those same analysis on, like that could be an interesting kind of mutually useful thing, I guess.
Yeah. And I see the last item on the agenda is an issue.
Yeah, that was just what I mentioned earlier. I just wanted to put it down, and point it out. More issues might be opened. It's on kind of Kaio's list to do more a deeper audit of Git of like what's happening when we collect on a GitLab repository. Um, so I just wanted to point this out. And with those, I know the commits are there. The
Yeah. So
materialized view,
if
I
the
cannot.
commits are there and you're not seeing them on the Augur front end, is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying that in general, I was just showing just to show it, but I'm not seeing commits like the data isn't showing up. Like commits data is not showing up for these. It's not just from the front end. It's in general. I just sent this because it was a condensed view of being able to see,
Yeah.
hey, here's all these GitLab repositories collected on, and these are all the commits that aren't there. If you query, like looking at it from 8 knot for each one of them, it shows no data from the commits. Anything that we use to analyze commits is showing no data, um, as well as some of the other tables, but I don't want to speak directly to any of the other ones until we like the commits one was an easy for sure. This isn't being I'm not seeing any evidence of this being collected on. Whenever I go outside of that, I just don't want to speak on something that hasn't been fully
So
looked through.
I just want to make sure I understand. There are commits in the commits table for these repositories.
No.
Okay, there are not commits in the commit table for this repositories.
Yes. And so I just showed it this way just for you could see that for all of them, but I'm glad that that's kind of why I wanted to bring this up. So then like these type of things could get, um, no one needs to go down a rabbit hole. The one good thing with like this type of stuff, when people are trying to kind of investigate a little bit of like what's being collected on and what's not, a lot of times the direct queries are good. But if you're trying to see it fast, 8 knot's always a good option. Um, that's kind of how I was able to see it on the front end. I'm familiar that like some of this has stuff with materialized views, and so kind of for the recording for the people who are newer to using like 8 not looking and parsing through data and accuracy. I ended up going over 2 8 not after this for each one of them, looking at what tables or what graphs were populating, which graphs didn't have any data, which graphs had some, those type of things. The commits one was just the most cut and dry. There is no data in these tables.
All right.
Since we don't have anything else, I was going to mention I've talked with Sean a little bit. There's like a um on 8 not and on like the Augur instances that Sean and I run, we take advantage of materialized views to do like common queries that we use a lot for 8 not for context. Makes it materialized views, makes things run faster if it's something that is done very regularly and usually takes a decent amount of time to process. Um, One of those materialized views realized there was an error in over the weekend, needs to update it. I'll put that PR in 8 not as well, because in 8 not what we have is we call those materialized views, but in the documentation it does have the fully, like if you didn't want to do any of the materialized views on your Augur instance and wanted to use 8 not still, you could just change the query to query directly instead of calling on the materialized view that might not be in your um, database, or you can add the materialized view to your database. You have that choice from how you want to manage
Yeah.
your Augur
Any
8 not pairing.
any Augur instance will create the materialized views by default. So
Oh, really? I didn't know
yeah,
that. That's cool.
yeah.
I didn't know that was a thing. Oh,
Oh
well,
yeah,
I made
yeah.
this more complicated than I thought. Oh, so does that mean that there needs to be a PR to Augur?
Yeah,
Uh,
we're gonna have to create an update to the database schema version that just includes this update to that materialized view. So I expect that's something we can do on Tuesday. Um,
okay. Yeah, I'm
if you
happy to
can
do the
open up an
PR.
issue.
Yeah, and if somebody points me towards the file, I'm happy to do the PR as well. But I'll open an issue for it either way. Um, but that's cool. I didn't realize that was a thing. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so actually, disregard most of what I said. Materialized views are great, and Augur implements a lot of these for you out of the box that are used in 8 not. So awesome. That's all. That's all I have.
That's all I have. Anybody else got any questions or things they want to bring forward today? All right. Thank you, everybody. I will
Thanks, everyone.
see you in a couple weeks.
Yep.
Bye.